Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to review the latest non-fiction book I've read, Stephen E. Ambrose's The Wild Blue. This book is a general overview of the use of the B-24 bomber in World War II in the European theater between 1944 and 1945, right near the end of the war. In very specific, it's about Senator George McGovern and the plane that he piloted, the Dakota Queen. Well, actually, it was a series of planes. They just named each one they got into the Dakota Queen in honor of his wife, Eleanor. As with every other B-24 flown, they had a crew. It was a total of 10. You had your co-pilot, navigator, radio man, bombardier, and then all the gunnery positions in the plane. This gives a very slight overview of the technology that went into building the B-24. I would have preferred a considerable more of that. This isn't a particularly big book, and I think that this particular piece of technology and how it was used and the men that used it and were justifiably decried as heroes because they were, could have used a meatier tome. They could have used more detail. Some of the parts about George McGovern were quite interesting, but I found the first half of the book, which dealt with the planes, McGovern's training, his marriage, and everything that was involved up to his leaving for Europe, was a little lackluster. And once it got to Europe, it picked up, it got more interesting. I really began to enjoy reading about them being stationed in Italy and their living conditions and the bombing runs they went on. The few times that they themselves were targeted by the Nazis. But at that stage of the war, the Nazis were in a very much of a defensive position. They were trying to desperately keep their cities from being destroyed and their infrastructure being destroyed, and to keep the war effort going. And they were somewhat successful. I mean, they were able to keep up fighter production well into 45. And there are occasions when McGovern really starts to open up a little, and you really begin to see what it was to be a pilot of a B-24 and the kind of impact it had not only on them physically, but emotionally and spiritually. I have to tell you, I found this book disappointing. I have never read anything by Stephen Ambrose, and he's written a lot of books about the military. I mean, right in the back of the book there's an ad, and there's 8 more books that deal with military history. And frankly, based on this book, I'm not reading anything else of his. A lot of this book, to me, seemed like a laundry list of names and little tiny blurbs about people. Like, Lieutenant John Smith, born in so-and-so in 1928, piloted this, was a pilot at age, XX, whatever it was. And then you never hear about this guy again. Occasionally, they'll get a little longer blurb. Not huge, little longer blurb. If you were to cut out everything in this book that wasn't really pertinent to an understanding of the planes and the men that flew them, if you got rid of all these little, and almost like filler, this would have been a long article. This wouldn't have been a book. And I think that in some ways that Ambrose has done a disservice to these men, because it really doesn't convey to me what they did in a realistic way. I'm not feeling it. And I've read articles online and essays and things that, in just a few paragraphs, pulled me in better than this entire book did. Now, I finished it because I wanted to know if McGovern finished all of his missions. You had to fly 35 to get rotated home, and he did. But his last mission was the end of the war, and he stayed after the surrender to fly some humanitarian missions into Berlin, the Berlin airlifts and things like that. And eventually he came home. I can't recommend it. I'm not happy with it. I'm not keeping it. It's getting donated. And I will not be reading anything else by Stephen Ambrose. I don't know if anyone else has had better luck with his writing. They like it more than I liked this. If you did, tell me in the comments. Because I was disappointed with this book. I was looking for something more, and I didn't get it. I only paid $1 for it, so my investment is fairly small.